Clean water. You've probably heard it described as a national treasure as well as a natural resource. Of course, it's both, and we all have a role in protecting it. The objective of the Clean Water Act is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of our nation's waters. The United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the states, and local governments are joined together to develop and implement programs that improve and protect the quality of our water. The two main approaches for achieving the objectives of the Clean Water Act are the technology-based approach and the water quality-based approach. The technology-based controls are the first line of defense. The EPA sets uniform national requirements for the pollution controls that industrial and municipal dischargers must achieve. If the technology-based controls do not achieve the desired level of water quality, then more stringent water quality-based controls must be developed. This presentation concentrates on the major features of the water quality-based approach to pollution control. The water quality-based approach is multifaceted and can be illustrated with 8 interrelated stages. Let's look at them one at a time. The first stage is to determine the protection level. This is accomplished by states adopting water quality standards. States use water quality standards as the legal basis for the water quality-based pollution control requirements, to assess the conditions of their waters and to make a determination as to whether more pollution controls are needed. States, territories, and Indian tribes qualifying for treatment as states for the Water Quality Standards Program adopt water quality standards for all waters of the U.S., including wetlands. These standards are legally binding laws or regulations. In setting water quality standards, states designate uses or goals for each water body and adopt water quality criteria to protect the designated uses. State water quality standards also include an anti-degradation policy to protect existing uses and to protect the level of water quality necessary to protect those existing uses. What are uses and criteria? Some typical uses are propagation and protection of fish and wildlife, public water supply, recreation including swimming, and navigational uses. Each state has its own system of establishing designated uses. Criteria are limits on a particular pollutant or on a condition of a water body that protect and support a use. Criteria are developed using scientifically defensible methods. EPA reviews and approves state water quality standards. Information on water quality standards, uses, criteria, and anti-degradation policies can be obtained from the EPA. I'll tell you where to find information on these and other programs at the end of this presentation. The second stage in the water quality-based approach is to conduct water quality assessments to identify waters where standards are not being met. Obviously, to know whether or not technology-based controls are adequate and to determine if water quality-based controls are needed, you must assess the quality of the waters. Many sections of the Clean Water Act require states to assess, compile data, and report on the status of their water bodies. Although each state may use different methods to identify and compile information on the status of its water bodies, states generally use existing information and new data collected from ongoing monitoring programs. The information is used to assess whether designated uses are being met and to see if water quality is improving or deteriorating. After states conduct water quality assessments to identify waters where standards are not being met, states set priorities. In this third stage, states set priorities based on the severity of the pollution, on the availability of information, and on a variety of other factors. EPA then reviews and approves the state's priority ranking. The next stage of the process is to evaluate the appropriateness of the water quality standards for specific waters. States may revise or reaffirm their water quality standards. For example, States may choose to develop site-specific criteria for a particular stream because particular species need to be protected or because the characteristics of the water body are significantly different from those used initially as a basis for the criteria. The fifth stage is to define and allocate control responsibilities. To do this, it is necessary to determine what pollution controls will be necessary to attain the water quality standards. In other words, we need to find out how much pollution stress a water body can absorb from all sources without violating the state's water quality standards. To determine that, we rely on a TMDL, a total maximum daily load for a water body. The TMDL is the total amount of pollution a body of water and aquatic life within it can receive without adversely affecting the aquatic life. The total maximum daily load calculations form the critical link between water quality standards and point and non-point source controls. Point sources include discernible, confined conduits, including pipes, ditches, channels, sewers, tunnels, and boats, and other floating craft from which pollutants are discharged. Non-point pollution sources are those that do not have a single point of origin. These include activities such as agriculture, forestry, strip mining, construction, and urban development. A total maximum daily load is derived through the use of mathematical models to determine the point and non-point source pollution loads that can be discharged to a water body without harming its ecosystem. The next stage is to establish source controls. Let me point out again that effective implementation of water quality-based controls requires an integrated and cooperative partnership between EPA and the states. The main responsibility for water quality management resides with the states through the adoption of water quality standards, through the control of the point source pollution via the permits program, through NPDES, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and through the control of non-point sources of pollution via non-point source management programs. Anyone who discharges wastewater into the waters of the continental United States must obtain a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. These permits are developed and issued by states or by the EPA if a state has not been delegated the responsibility to issue permits. Permits place limits on the amount of a pollutant that can be discharged to a water body and are written for municipal, industrial, and federal facilities. The Clean Water Act and federal regulations require that all NPDES permits place sufficient limits on dischargers to achieve applicable state water quality standards. The permit commits a discharger or permittee to reduce or eliminate discharges in an orderly fashion in specific steps and at specified times. These commitments are legally enforceable. It is up to the discharger to determine the most cost-effective means for meeting the permit limits, possibly through pollution prevention, additional pollution controls, recycling, or with in-process changes. The permit also requires dischargers to monitor their wastes and to report the amount and nature of all wastes. Non-point sources of pollution are often complex. They involve chemical pollution and other forms of pollution. Federal grant programs have been established to help states, units of local government, conservation districts, and farmers to reduce pollution from non-point sources. The seventh stage in the water quality-based approach to pollution control is to monitor and enforce compliance. Simply put, the permittee or discharger must meet the conditions in the NPDES permit, and the appropriate regulatory authority, either the state or EPA, uses a variety of methods to determine whether the permittee is in compliance with permit limits and with other conditions of the permit. Permits contain self-monitoring requirements which, as the name implies, are the responsibility of the individual discharger. The self-monitoring portion of a permit spells out the frequency, type of sampling requirements, and analytical and data reporting requirements imposed on a discharger. This information is reported to the regulatory agency. The EPA is responsible for overseeing that the Clean Water Act requirements are met. If a state has not been delegated the authority to operate the NPDES program, compliance reviews of all permittees in that state are the responsibility of the EPA. In an NPDES state, that is, a state that has NPDES authority, the EPA retains oversight responsibilities for the state's compliance programs. EPA and states may use compliance inspections or field activities to monitor compliance. Based on a review of data, EPA or a state regulatory agency determines whether a permittee has complied with the requirements of an NPDES permit. If a facility has been identified as having apparent violations, EPA or a state will review the facility's compliance history. This review focuses on the magnitude, frequency, and duration of violations. A determination of the appropriate enforcement response is then made. EPA and states are authorized to bring civil or criminal action against facilities which violate their NPDES permits. State non-point source programs are enforced under state law and to the extent provided by state law. The final stage in the cycle is to measure progress. More precisely, it is to evaluate and measure success against goals and objectives. Through monitoring and other programs, the states and EPA assess the effectiveness of point and non-point source controls. In doing so, it is possible to determine whether water quality standards are attained, whether additional point or non-point source controls are required, or whether water quality standards should be revised. States under Section 305B of the Clean Water Act report to EPA once every 2 years on the quality of their rivers, streams, lakes, estuaries, coastal waters, wetlands, and groundwater. This information is an integral part of ongoing activities to measure the progress of environmental controls. EPA summarizes this information and delivers a report to Congress on the status and conditions of our nation's waters. Let's review a few of the basic points we covered. First, technology-based controls that are established by EPA are tried in an effort to control the problem. Water quality-based controls are imposed if additional pollution reduction is necessary for a water body to attain its water quality standards. The level of control necessary is determined by using the multifaceted process we've just covered. These steps and other actions are a part of what EPA and the states require to prevent and reduce pollution of our nation's waters. Furthermore, EPA develops technical and policy guidance and other materials to assure that compliance with the requirements of the Clean Water Act can be achieved efficiently and effectively. These materials are supplemented by technical assistance workshops, meetings and other forums, grants to states, Indian tribes and territories, and through individual consultations. This completes the discussion of the water quality-based approach to pollution control. Additional information on this and other topics may be obtained from the following.